Growing up as a kid, I never really got into CRPGs like Fallout, Baldur's Gate, Torment, and others, but over the years I eventually played different RPGs that led me to playing Fallout 2 that I loved. The unique setting at the time was amazing and so much fun. And now, years later, because I've loved all the games in the series for the most part, I've decided to revisit the series' roots to see if Fallout 1 truly holds up to this day. Fallout 1 is a very different game in many ways than Fallout 3, New Vegas, or 4. It's an old game that plays with the old CRPG style with a top-down perspective like classic RPGs of the 90s and early 2000s. First off, don't play this game in 1920 by 1080. I have to give this warning ahead of time if you ever try and pick this game up because it is so hard to play in 1920 by 1080, or at least tweak with the scaling options or something, because I didn't learn until late in my playthrough that you could kind of tweak these around a little bit and make it better and easier to see, but trying to play the game on 1920 by 1080 is super hard. The game feels super zoomed out, everything's tiny, and it's very difficult to click on anything. So it's just not well suited at all for large widescreens. It also has giant black bars on the sides, so you're really only kind of getting like a 4:3 display, so it's kind of pointless to be playing at this resolution anyways. Set in 2161, the game begins decades after World War III broke out. In this alternate history where resources became the conflict between nations that eventually leads to the United States and China going into war, and eventually the global nuclear exchange that results in the wasteland that is Fallout. The game uses a stat system called Special, where it breaks down the different stats by different categories of what they do. You can get things like repairing abilities or the ability to sneak and steal, and these actually do affect the game quite a bit. Getting things like steal can allow you to steal something off a character to use to open a door, like a key card or something, and different actions like that. Charisma and others can help you talk to people and talk them out of things or convince them of stuff. It works for the most part pretty well at allowing you to really, a lot of player agency to really decide how you want to play the game. Now you play as an inhabitant of Vault 13, one of the great bunkers that were created before the war ended that many people fled into at the opening of the nuclear exchange. The overseer of this vault sends you out on a mission to find a replacement water chip because Vault 13, which is the one you're in, is failing. And as a result, if it's not replaced, the vault will become uninhabitable, so the overseer sends you out to the location of another vault, Vault 15, and asks you to go find a replacement there. When you arrive in Vault 15, you discover there's no water chip there, and the game basically just gives you a simple message saying it's not here, you gotta search somewhere else. And the game gives you no directions, there's no overhead objective like you would find in Oblivion, Skyrim, or Fallout 3 or Fallout 4. It kind of just lets you off into the world to do what you want. And so basically what you're going to do is you're just going to wander around to the different objectives and talk to people and ask them if they know anything. Most people have never heard of a vault or seen a vault and have no idea what a water chip is, so they won't be much help, but that's sort of just the way the game plays out. It's about exploring and seeing the world. In a way, Fallout 1 feels kind of like a traditional pen and paper RPG like Dungeons and Dragons. You sort of forge your own path. At its core, the storyline of Fallout 1 is pretty basic for the most part. There's really only 3 objectives: find the water chip and then 2 others after that. It feels very different than modern RPGs, which often contain vast quest lines with more narrowed focus for its main story. It also fails you to give you any sense of direction like I mentioned earlier, which means that it's really about sort of exploring the world rather than the main story itself kind of guiding you. And that's sort of the fun of it. You can really get invested into this world a lot more than other games. The world of Fallout 1 is incredibly grim, more so than any other Fallout game and more so than many other games out there. And while you may say, wait a minute, Tausken, well, so was New Vegas or 3 or any other Fallout game, Fallout 1 really takes it to the next level. There's barely a sense of civilization here at all, with loose cities and towns like Shady Sands, which would eventually form the New California Republic, or the Hub, which is more like a tiny trading camp, or Junktown. You'll just find tons of random people and quickly learn that nobody's really surviving really well in this area. It's just a wasteland of lawlessness. There's raiders, rivals, schemings, gangs, factions all over the place, while towns scrape by barely as oppressive raiders continue to fall on them. It's a really grim feeling, and nobody really seems happy in this world at all when you talk to them. The music and graphics really help to add to this grim feeling as well. The music can only be described as just odd. I'm going to play some here. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of the comparison between Brood War and StarCraft 2. Brood War is a very dark, grim game. The music is grim, the graphics are dark, the story is dark. But StarCraft 2 is much more cartoony, fake, and sort of toy-like. It's a lot like comparing Fallout 4 or Fallout 3 to Fallout 1. Fallout 1 just feels so much more moody. The graphics are very dark and mysterious. Everything is just so run down and rusty. The atmosphere of the music is just so creepy. It's honestly very unsettling in a lot of ways, and I really love that. It really truly feels like a wasteland. As far as gameplay goes, there's a lot to do in Fallout 1. There's a ton of locations with their own things, and some you don't even really go to in the main stories. You'll kind of have to discover them just by stumbling upon them or from hearing about them. You have places like the Brotherhood of Steel you can go to, or Junktown, or the Hub, or Shady Sands, or other vaults and places. And really, each town has its own different feel and story to it. There's usually like 2 to 3 different side quests, sometimes more, and there's a bit of a story to it as well. For example, when you run into Junktown, you discover that there's an assassination attempt by the guy who runs the local casino called Gizmo against the mayor of the town, and you can get involved if you want and take a side, and you can also talk to the different civilians in the area who have their own opinion on the matter. The game also has a lot of different ways you can complete objectives. Like, for example, in Shady Sands, you're given a quest to kill rad scorpions, and you could just go in there and kill them all, or you could just plant a dynamite on the cave and just cause a cave-in, blocking all the rad scorpions out. There's a lot of player agency in Fallout 1 to really complete objectives how you want. Gameplay is also unfortunately where Fallout 1 does not age too well. While it's nice to be thrown into the world and given the freedom to pursue your own objectives, the game also doesn't do a lot of favors for you. It's incredibly difficult. This game has massive difficulty spikes, and sometimes it can feel purely random. I accepted a quest early on to protect a caravan, and the first couple times it was pretty dang easy, but then I soon found that this entire system was basically based on randomness of how many people is going to attack the caravan as we're going between locations, where I just got absolutely obliterated by a ton of raiders that kept spawning by random chance. It wasn't until I got lucky on one save that there was a much lower amount that I was actually able to beat. And this extends to a lot of the story missions as well. A lot of times it just doesn't really tell you clearly what to do or how to do things, and so sometimes you're kind of just left trying to fumble around to figure something out. I also didn't really like the combat system. It's a turn-based system that unfortunately just hasn't aged too well. It doesn't help that things like sound effects and the animations are not that fun, and they're very long, and so it just takes forever to get through combat encounters, and I was really just waiting for these to end so I could get on to the next story area or do the next action. Each turn you'll get a certain amount of actions that can be used to either equip a new item, or move somewhere, or use an item. Your choices really boil down to just shooting something, stabbing something, moving, using a healing item, or maybe using something like a grenade, but most of the time you're just going to be using the basic attack. And so it's really boring. There's not a whole lot you're really doing here. You can make some slight choices, like you can pick where to aim on a particular person. Those can have some effects, like if you hit somebody in the leg or something like that, but it's just not that good of a system. Followers can be recruited to join you, but they really just serve as meat shields, which makes them completely pointless. You can't control them in any way in combat, and they can block you sometimes because they get stuck on like a door, and then it's really hard to get out, and they don't level with you, so over time they'll eventually just die to more difficult enemies instantly. The game also doesn't really do you any favors on difficulty, like I mentioned earlier, so once you get into the later stages of the game, they just literally one-shot your followers, making them pretty much pointless. Inventory management is an absolute colossal mess in this game. All you have is one vertical column that you can look down for all of your items, and you get an up and a down button that you can press to go up or down the list. And so it's just a pain in the butt to try and find the items that you need and get them to the right area or equip them or move them or use them for an action. And it doesn't really do you any favors on weight limits, so sometimes you're over or under, but it's not very clear. Objects also sometimes blend into the terrain when you're trying to find them to click on them, and sometimes you have to do this to actually use it for a quest, or they'll get stuck behind, like if you kill somebody and he gets stuck behind a wall that's in your perspective blocking it, so then you have to kind of move your character around back and forth trying to get him in the perfect position so that you can see the guy so that it reveals the wall a little bit. Overall though, I loved Fallout 1. It was a ton of fun, and I would highly recommend it if you've never played it. Maybe you're just curious, or you've never played a CRPG, or you have, but you missed this one. It's a lot of fun. The story and the world and the atmosphere in particular are amazing, and while the combat sucks and it's very clunky in that old sense, it doesn't really interfere at all with the fun of this game, because this game is really just a role-playing game at its core. The story and world is just so great, and so I would recommend anyone to go out and play this game right now.